It's late 2023, and a stunning forensic breakthrough finally shatters a 36-year-old mystery. In a quiet Virginia DNA lab, a computer screen flashes match. Investigators hold their breath. They have a name. At a press conference, the world learns the truth. Alan Wilmer Sr. has been identified as the suspect behind at least one of the Colonial Parkway murders. The revelation is surreal. After decades of fear and speculation, there's at last a face to the horror. But there's a catch that makes this announcement bittersweet and deeply unsettling. For years, the Colonial Parkway killer was a ghost. Now, thanks to genetic genealogy and old-fashioned police work, that ghost has a name, Alan Wilmer Sr. Wilmer was a 63-year-old fisherman who died in 2017, meaning he will never face prosecution for these crimes. DNA evidence from the crime scenes conclusively link Wilmer to the murders of 20-year-old David Knobling and 14-year-old Robin Edwards in 1987, as well as the 1989 killing of 29-year-old Teresa Terry Howell. Virginia's Deputy Police Superintendent Tim Lyon addresses the cameras with somber expression. Only those who have lost a child this way can understand the sorrow and the frustration of not knowing who is responsible. I hope the identification of the killer brings some peace to families. The crowd of journalists is stunned. The killer had finally been unmasked, but he was already in his grave. Who was Alan Wilmer Sr.? And why did his name never surface until now? As investigators reveal, Wilmer had no prior felony record, so his DNA was never in any criminal database. It took cutting-edge genetic sleuthing, building a family tree from DNA left at the crime scenes, to zero in on him. In mid-2023, scientists quietly obtained a sample of Wilmer's own genetic material, with a court order, since he was deceased, and confirmed the match. The result was definitive. The same man's DNA was found on both Robin Edwards and Terry Howell, linking one suspect to at least 3 of the killings. When the Virginia State Police and FBI finally made the announcement in January 2024, it sent shockwaves through the community. After so long, they had their man, or so it seemed. Alan Wilmer Sr. hardly fit the typical Hollywood image of a serial killer. He was a stocky, weather-beaten local man, only 5 feet 5 inches tall, but powerfully built from years of manual labor. In fact, one victim's brother later described Wilmer as, think Popeye. He worked on the water with a barrel chest and huge calloused hands. Wilmer made his living on Virginia's tidewaters, a commercial fisherman harvesting clams and oysters from a small boat aptly named the Denny Wade. He also ran a tree-trimming business called Better Tree Service and was known as an avid hunter and skilled archer to neighbors and friends. Pokey was an outdoorsman, a rough-around-the-edges family man with 2 kids and a penchant for the woods and water. Nothing about his public persona screamed murderer. Yet, in hindsight, there were dark undertones. Wilmer was said to have a temper and an intolerant streak. Investigators later uncovered anecdotes of him harassing couples along deserted lovers' lanes. Even an instance where he confronted a young pair on the Colonial Parkway because he mistakenly thought they were a same-sex couple, then laughed it off when he realized he was wrong. Eerie coincidence or early warning sign. Either way, Alan Wilmer knew the lonely backroads and pull-offs of coastal Virginia all too well. He also had the means to travel around the region, driving a distinctive blue 1966 Dodge pickup truck, license plate EM-RAW, from hunting ground to fishing pier. Now, decades later, police implore anyone who crossed paths with Wilmer in the 1980s to come forward with information. Could there be other secrets buried in Wilmer's past? The authorities aren't taking any chances. They're reconstructing his life piece by piece. In a packed briefing room, the families of the victims sit shoulder to shoulder, clutching each other's hands as the suspect's name is announced. Some eyes well with tears. Others stare forward in numb disbelief. After years of agonizing uncertainty, they finally know who might have taken their loved ones. A spokesperson reads a prepared statement on behalf of the Knobling and Edwards families, the words heavy with emotion. For 36 years, our families have lived in a vacuum of the unknown. We have lived with the fear that a person capable of deliberately killing Robin and David could do it again. Now we have a sense of relief and justice knowing he can no longer victimize another A brief flicker of relief passes over the families. A monster has been named and can never hurt anyone else. But that relief is tempered by heartache and anger. The statement continues, "His death will not allow us to seek out the answer to countless questions that have haunted us for so long." In the small crowd, a woman's voice breaks as she whispers, "He'll never have an answer for what he did." The families know that with Wilmer 6 feet under, they will never hear him confess, never face him in a courtroom to finally ask, why? At the podium, a sister of victim Terry Howell speaks through tears. While we are grateful for the closure provided, nothing will bring Terry back. The void left by her absence over the years is inexpressible. She pauses, choking up, then adds, "We kindly request privacy as we navigate the host of new emotions this brings." Cameras flash, capturing the poignant moment families of multiple victims embrace in solidarity, grieving together, united by both sorrow and a long-awaited sliver of closure. In the back of the room, one man, Bill Thomas, brother of Kathy Thomas, a 1986 Parkway victim, watches with conflicted eyes. Later, he would say the families felt mixed emotions on this day, profound relief at a breakthrough, but also fury and frustration that it took so long. As the press conference ends, the families exchange hugs. There's gratitude for the detectives who never gave up, but also a lingering resentment that justice in a traditional sense has been denied. No trial, no chance to see the killer punished. The room empties, but the Colonial Parkway families are left with as many questions as answers, their long journey through grief taking yet another unexpected turn. The fallout from the Wilmer revelation is complicated. Prosecutors publicly acknowledge that if Alan "Pokey" Wilmer were still alive, he would be facing multiple murder charges for the deaths of Nobbling, Edwards, and Howell. But with Wilmer beyond the reach of any court, the case takes on a haunting what could have been. "We were this close to bringing him to justice," an investigator says, holding his thumb and forefinger an inch apart. There's pride that the case was solved, but also a gnawing feeling of injustice, a killer unpunished. One retired FBI agent grimly notes, "Closure without justice is a bitter pill to swallow." For the families, it's as if the final chapter was ripped out of the book. They know who, but they may never know why. Authorities vow to continue digging. In the weeks after the announcement, police swarm a rural property that Wilmer once owned, armed with a search warrant. Forensics teams comb through old storage sheds and soil, looking for any hidden evidence. Perhaps trophies from victims, or clues linking Wilmer to other crimes. The media hovers overhead, cameras zoomed in as technicians carry out boxes of possible evidence. The police remain tight-lipped about what, if anything, they found, simply stating that the investigation remains ongoing. Meanwhile, the FBI and Virginia State Police launch a public tip campaign. They urge anyone who ever worked, hunted, or even drank a beer with Wilmer in the 1980s to speak up. Every anecdote, no matter how small, could help retrace Wilmer's steps and potentially connect him to other unsolved cases. At an FBI press briefing, Special Agent Brian Dugan steps forward. As investigators look towards solving other crimes the suspect may have committed, we're asking the public to come forward with any information about their encounters with Alan Wilmer, he announces. Even though Mr. Wilmer is deceased, it's not too late to do the right thing. Perspectives change over time. If you know something, now is the time to share it. The message is clear. The case might not be over. In fact, Wilmer's exposure has cracked open a Pandora's box of new leads and uncertainties. Was he responsible for all of the Colonial Parkway murders, or just some? Could there be other victims beyond the Parkway? The public, the press, and the victims' families brace for what might come next. As the investigation widens, a troubling question emerges. Was Alan Wilmer Sr. the sole perpetrator of the Colonial Parkway murders? Or could the truth be more complex? Even with a DNA match tying Wilmer to 3 victims, half of the known Parkway cases remain unsolved. And so far, no forensic evidence links Wilmer to the first 1986 double murder or the final 1989 double murder in series. At the press conference, State Police spokesperson Corinne Geller carefully noted that while the similarities between all the killings cannot be ignored, there is no physical evidence to link the Nobbling Edwards case to the other Colonial Parkway homicides. This leaves the door open to a chilling possibility. Perhaps the Colonial Parkway killer was more than one person all along. Indeed, some veteran investigators always suspected multiple killers. Behavioral experts like Larry McCann of the VSP believed the level of control needed to subdue two healthy young victims at once suggested two perpetrators working in tandem. It's extremely difficult for one person to dominate two people without help, he argued. An FBI agent on the case back then agreed that a pair of killers might have been responsible for the spree. Could it be that Alan Wilmer was only half of the deadly equation? Or perhaps he committed some of the murders, and a copycat or another predator committed the others? This theory gained traction in the wake of Wilmer's identification. True crime aficionados and internet forums buzzed with debate. Wilmer was short. Could he alone overpower two Navy women in 1986? Why did he use a gun in one attack, but possibly a different method in others? The inconsistencies raised serious doubts. In fact, one persistent rumor in the late 80s was that the killer might have been impersonating a police officer to get his victims to let their guard down. Couples on deserted roads might have trusted a man with a badge and blue lights long enough for him to strike. Image: blurred figure in law enforcement uniform. Narrator: what if the predator wasn't lurking in the shadows, but walking up with a badge and a flashlight? Over the years, some witnesses claim to have seen an unmarked car with flashing lights near pull-off areas around the time of the murders, feeding theories that the murder pretended to be law enforcement. The Oxygen Network even posed a question in a documentary special. Was a Colonial Parkway killer pretending to be law enforcement? This haunting idea leads many to wonder. If Wilmer was a killer, did he adopt such a ruse? Or does a police impersonator theory point to someone else entirely? It's a twist that casts a long shadow of doubt over the case. Was Alan Wilmer the only monster-stalking lovers on the Parkway? Or did he have an accomplice or copycat, cloaked behind a fake badge? As investigators sift through new tips, an astonishing piece of information surfaces from the case files. Bill Thomas, whose sister Kathy was one of the first Parkway victims, reveals that Alan Wilmer was on law enforcement's radar decades ago. Believe it or not, FBI agents told my father back in 1988 that they had driven out to Wilmer's house just days after Keith Call and Cassandra Haley vanished. Thomas recounts. According to Thomas, the agents found Wilmer in his driveway engaged in highly suspicious behavior. What exactly he was doing remains a closely guarded detail. Wilmer was apparently considered suspect number one in that 1988 disappearance, the very case that, to this day, remains unsolved. Shockingly, Wilmer was even brought in and given an FBI polygraph test, which he managed to pass, leading authorities to release him. In hindsight, that was a fateful misstep. How on earth did they not get his DNA back then? Bill Thomas asks, his frustration palpable. It's a gut-wrenching revelation. The killer was within reach in 1988, but slipped away due to a deceptive lie detector result and lack of hard evidence. One can only imagine how many lives might have been saved if Wilmer had been unmasked 35 years ago. All of this casts profound doubt on Wilmer's sole responsibility. Yes, Wilmer's DNA places him at some of the crime scenes, but the full picture is far from complete. Did he truly commit all the Colonial Parkway murders by himself? Or have we only solved a piece of a much larger puzzle? Investigators caution that other perpetrators could have been at work, either alongside Wilmer or completely independently, mimicking his brutal tactics. The remaining unsolved cases: the brutal slayings of Kathy Thomas and Rebecca Dowski in 1986, the disappearance of Keith Call and Cassandra Haley in 1988, and the killings of Anna Maria Phelps and Daniel Lauer in 1989, are still open. The police stress that those cases are active and nothing is being ruled out. Could it be that the Colonial Parkway was the hunting ground for more than one serial killer? It's a terrifying thought, but one the evidence has yet to conclusively deny or confirm. The story that began with young love and idyllic drives along the Colonial Parkway has morphed into something far more complex. A saga of technology, time, and tantalizing unanswered questions. Even with Alan Wilmer Sr. identified, the mystery endures. Investigators now juggle a mix of relief at finally naming a suspect and the daunting realization that the case isn't fully closed. As one FBI agent admits to a reporter, we have a who, at least for some of these murders. What we don't have is the why or if there were more involved. The public watches intently as new leads trickle in. Did Wilmer confide in anyone before he died? Could there be a hidden journal, a confession tape, or a long-lost piece of evidence waiting to be discovered in an attic or old fishing boat? The authorities certainly hope so. They are following every thread. Meanwhile, families of the victims cling to each new development. Closure has come to some, but not all. For the families of Kathy Thomas, Becky Dowski, Keith Call, Cassandra Haley, Anna Maria Phelps, and Daniel Lauer, the nightmare continues just as before. Their cases remain unsolved, their killer or killers unidentified. They take some solace in knowing one predator is off the board, but wonder if another could still be out there. Each passing year without answers is another year those families live in torment, desperate for the truth. As the second chapter of this story closes, one can't shake the final image, a stack of cold case files on an investigator's desk, topped with a photograph of Alan Wilmer Sr., eyes blacked out in ink as deceased, and underneath, the photograph of other victims whose murderer remains a phantom. The DNA revelation solved one piece of the puzzle, yet the overall picture remains blurry and incomplete. Was Alan Wilmer the Colonial Parkway killer, or just one of them? The evidence is spoken, but only in part, and the dead can no longer talk. The Colonial Parkway murders have spanned nearly 4 decades of fear, grief, and now, startling revelations. But even with a major suspect identified, the tale is not over. New evidence and old rumors hint at shadows yet unexposed. A dead suspect provides no answers, and the living are left with only speculation. Did Wilmer take his bloody secrets to the grave? Or is there another chapter waiting to unfold in this dark saga? The camera pans over the dark stretch of the Colonial Parkway at dusk, the trees swaying in ominous silence. Somewhere out there, the final pieces of this mystery lie in wait, and the quick crime vault will stay unlocked until every answer is brought into the light. To be continued.